Have you ever wondered what happens in the background when you type print or length on the console and then press enter? That is exactly what we're going to discuss in this video. The first you need to know is that print and length are functions. Even if you don't understand how functions work, you use them every single day that you open your console and write R code. So to understand what functions are and how to use them is much easier than you think. But let's take first things first. What is a function? A function is a block of code that wraps functionality that requires a series of steps to be done. Let's take an actual example of a built-in function that you probably use every day, the length function. What does length do in the background so that it returns the size of a vector? First, R makes sure that the length argument is a container object and that its length can be measured. Since here we have a character vector, which is a container object, length proceeds in the second step, which is to initiate in the background a counter variable, and while traversing through each of the elements of the vector, the counter variable takes a new value greater by 1. When all the elements are counted, the final value of the counter variable is returned, 3 in our case. Of course, this is an approximation of the actual implementation of the length function in R, since the details are probably different, but I want you to keep the idea that behind this single line of code that you use each time, there is a series of steps that are repeated. If there is one thing that you should keep from this video is this, that functions wrap into a name a series of steps that is repeated. Calling the name of the function corresponds to executing these steps. So, basically functions help you avoid writing lines and lines of code for tasks that you do very often. In other words, functions help you stay focused on more important parts of your script while removing the need to write lines of code that are secondary and that execute functionality that is very common. Then, why not create your own function? All the functions you learned until now are given to you as soon as you enter RStudio. They are so-called built-in functions. And what does this mean? It means that when R is installed, these functions are included. You just need to remember their names and what these functions do for you. However, most of the times when you want to perform a specific task for analyzing data in your field, you will discover that in your workflow there are scenarios that require you to repeat a few steps in the beginning, in the middle, or in the end of your script. In that case, R may not provide you with a function that does exactly what you want to do. Think about it. R cannot predict all possible repetitive series of steps that cover all possible scenarios for all R users. That is why, sooner than you may think, you will be in a position that you want to write your own functions that could help you save valuable time and spend your energy on doing the important parts of a task at hand. Let's see an example of a series of steps that you will definitely not want to repeat every time you start your data analysis. The first step in any textual analysis is to do some basic pre-processing to a string. For instance, you may want to first split the string into a character vector whose members are the words of the string. A second step in preparing the data may be to delete any punctuation marks, and the third step to convert all characters of a vector to lowercase. These 3 steps are very common in the beginning of an analysis, and once you learn how to create a function, you will create a function that wraps these 3 steps into a single function name. The idea then is that if you call that function, then these 3 steps will be executed one after the other. How do I create a function? Let's take some baby steps towards creating such a function. And to do that, let's create or else define a simpler function that consists of 2 lines. Let's break down the parts of this function. First, a function consists of a function name. This is the name that you will use when you will be calling that function. Usually, the name of a function corresponds to its purpose. Here, I want to print the length of a string in terms of its words. Then we have arguments. After the name, a pair of parentheses follows. Within the parentheses, you may write the so-called arguments of the function. The arguments are the objects that you want to process. The common scenario is that the function takes any string that the user has at hand and applies some transformations to it. be that splitting, tagging, or parsing it. Arguments are optional. In this function, I did not write anything between the parentheses since I chose not to have arguments. This means that this function does one and the same thing each time it is called. It does not accept any input by the user. Having arguments depends on the type of the function that you want to create. In general, function arguments are really important, and we will create new functions that take arguments in the next video. Lastly, we have the function body. Inside the curly braces that follow, you write statements that do what you want your function to do. The function body defines what a function does. In our case, the first line splits a string into a character vector that consists of the words hello, world, and the exclamation mark, and stores the result into a variable called str, while the second line prints the length of that character vector, essentially counting the number of words in the given string. After defining a function, you are ready to use it. As with other built-in functions, you can call it by using its name, followed by a pair of parentheses that include possible arguments. In our case, the function is defined without arguments, which means that we do not need to write anything within the parentheses. By hitting enter, all the statements within the curly braces are executed one by one, as if you entered them separately on the console. Let's try now some more useful functions in the next video. If you would like to be notified when it's out, make sure you are subscribed and you hit the notification bell.